Imagine a world where the maps of Africa looked nothing like the ones we know, where the great European empires, instead of carving up the continent at will, were forced to negotiate with a single unstoppable African power. A power forged not by chance, but by the will of one man, Shaka Zulu. In our history, Shaka built a formidable kingdom in the early 19th century, reshaping warfare and striking terror into enemies. But his empire, as mighty as it was, remained confined to southeastern Africa. When European colonization swept the continent, the Zulu kingdom was eventually crushed. But what if Shaka had gone further? What if, instead of ruling a kingdom, he had united all of southern Africa into a single empire, stretching from the Cape to the Limpopo, from the Indian Ocean to the Kalahari? Stay with me until the end, because the ripple effects of this alternate history don't just rewrite Africa's story, they reshape the entire modern world. To build this alternate world, we need to start with the man himself. Shaka was born around 1787, the illegitimate son of a minor Zulu chief. Raised in hardship, he developed a ferocious determination to prove himself. By 1816, he seized power over the Zulu and began transforming them into a military machine unlike anything southern Africa had ever seen. His innovations were revolutionary. The iklwa, a short stabbing spear, replaced the traditional throwing spear. His regiments fought in disciplined formations, the famous bullhorn encirclement tactic. Battles that once ended with scattered skirmishes now became decisive massacres. In real history, Shaka's campaigns triggered the Mfecane, a period of upheaval and migration that displaced millions. Some tribes were destroyed, others fled north to found new kingdoms. But here, our timeline diverges. Instead of fueling endless destruction, Shaka recognizes that fear alone won't secure his empire. He begins integrating rivals into his system, not just as subjects, but as allies. The Sotho bring agricultural wealth from the highlands. The Tswana, cattle herders of the interior, add to the empire's economic strength. The Xhosa, longtime rivals near the Cape, bring coastal access and maritime knowledge. The Swazi, skilled warriors, swell Shaka's armies. Imagine a Zulu leader not just feared as a conqueror, but respected as a unifier. What does a Southern African confederation under Shaka look like in its infancy? By the 1820s, this alternate Zulu empire stretches far beyond KwaZulu-Natal. Instead of a fragmented landscape of clans, Southern Africa is consolidated into one of the largest African polities ever created. The Mfecane still happens, but its outcome changes. Instead of endless refugees, displaced groups find a place within the empire. They are given land, security, and the promise of belonging under the Zulu banner. This consolidation has enormous consequences. Trade routes, once vulnerable to raiders, are secured. Cattle wealth multiplies, feeding both the people and the armies. The empire develops a system of tribute, where local leaders maintain autonomy but owe loyalty to Shaka. Southern Africa, once a patchwork of tribes, now resembles a proto-nation state, centralized, disciplined, and economically vibrant. But unity at home means confrontation abroad, and across the sea, European powers are already tightening their grip on the region. By the 1820s, Europe's colonial appetite is growing insatiable. Britain has seized the Cape Colony from the Dutch. The Dutch Boers, resentful, prepare for their great trek inland. Portugal clings to Mozambique, hoping to expand. In real history, these forces face divided African polities. But in this alternate timeline, they encounter a single, united African empire with tens of thousands of battle-hardened warriors. The Boers, pushing north, clash with Shaka's regiments. Their muskets fire, but they reload slowly. The Zulu encircle them, cutting down settlers in decisive battles that halt the great trek before it begins. The British, confident in their naval power, attempt expeditions inland, but they find themselves meeting organized armies, not scattered tribes. After suffering defeats, they are forced into negotiations. Portugal, the weakest of the colonial powers, realizes quickly that direct conquest is suicide and pivots toward diplomacy. If you're enjoying this journey into alternate history, imagine the countless other worlds that could have been. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because we'll be diving into many more histories that never were. But if Europe can't conquer Southern Africa, what does that mean for the coming scramble for Africa? By the late 19th century, the scramble for Africa divides almost the entire continent among European powers. But in this world, Southern Africa is a glaring exception. The Berlin Conference of 1884 redraws Africa's map, but the Zulu Empire is recognized as an independent power. Britain, desperate for trade, offers firearms and technology in exchange for access to resources. The empire modernizes decades earlier than in real history, adopting rifles, cannons, and even limited railroads. The economic effects ripple outward. Southern Africa becomes a supplier of ivory, gold, and later diamonds, not under European extraction, but on African terms. With control of its ports, it sets tariffs, negotiates treaties, and maintains sovereignty. The Atlantic slave trade, too, shifts. Instead of being a hunting ground for slavers, the empire becomes a fortress against it. Slavery declines faster, and European merchants pivot toward legitimate trade. Southern Africa is not colonized, not enslaved, not broken apart. Instead, it enters the modern era as a self-determined African empire. But unity brings another challenge. How do you govern so many peoples, languages, and cultures under one banner? Inside the empire, life looks very different from the fractured history we know. Shaka establishes a centralized bureaucracy, but allows local rulers autonomy under imperial oversight. This creates stability while fostering loyalty. Zulu becomes the official language of administration and the army, but regional languages thrive in daily life. Over time, a new Southern African identity develops, a fusion of Zulu, Sotho, Tswana, and Xhosa traditions. Military service remains a unifying force. Regiments are drawn from every group, trained together, and equipped with modern firearms. The empire transitions from spear warfare to a professional army that blends African tactics with European weaponry. Cities grow as centers of trade and governance. Durban and Cape Town become bustling ports, not colonial outposts, but African cities connected to the global economy. Universities and schools emerge, teaching not only European science, but also African history and philosophy. By the dawn of the 20th century, Southern Africa stands as a modernizing African state, comparable in strength to Japan during the Meiji era. But how does this empire navigate the seismic upheavals of the 20th century? World wars, the Cold War, and decolonization. Globally, the presence of a powerful Southern African empire changes everything. When World War I erupts, Britain can no longer count on South African troops to fight under its flag. Instead, the empire chooses neutrality, or perhaps intervenes for its own interests. The war's outcome still favors the Allies, but the colonial world looks less stable. World War II is even more complex. Hitler's Germany seeks African resources, but faces an independent power controlling gold and diamond mines. Could the Zulu Empire tilt the balance by supplying the Allies or by refusing to engage at all? The Cold War unfolds differently too. In real history, Africa was carved up into spheres of influence, with fragile post-colonial states exploited by both the US and the Soviet Union. But here, Southern Africa acts as a counterweight, a strong, unified African state able to resist outside meddling. The apartheid system, so devastating in our timeline, never emerges. There are no white settler states enforcing racial dominance because the settlers were never allowed to take over. Instead, Africa enters the modern age with a far stronger sense of unity, pride, and independence. So what if Shaka Zulu had united all of Southern Africa? The answer is a world where Africa isn't carved apart, where colonialism is weaker, where slavery declines faster, and where the global balance of power is forever altered. Of course, no empire is without problems. Governing such diversity would require delicate balance. Conflicts would still arise, modernization would bring tension, and the empire might fracture in time. But even then, Africa would fracture from strength, not weakness. And perhaps the greatest legacy of this alternate history is not in wars or borders, but in possibility. The possibility of an Africa that writes its own destiny, stands as an equal on the world stage, and reshapes the modern age. If this vision of history fascinated you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because next time we'll dive into another alternate past that could have changed everything. Could Shaka's empire, had it truly united Southern Africa, have rewritten the destiny of the entire world? Or was the weight of history too heavy for any one man to change? I'll leave that question with you.